What's up, guys? Coming to you here with another video before the season starts. I have a kind of a plan here of what I want to talk about today. First thing I want to do is talk about Waldrop's trade because everybody's been talking about that one. And then we're gonna go into something I've seen in the Dynasty community, YouTube community a lot, where people do an audit of a team. We could do this for other teams if you want, but I'm just gonna do it for my team so you all can see kind of the format of it. I think they're really useful. They might not tell you stuff right at the beginning of the season. It might not be apparent until later in the season, but I'm looking forward to doing that. So those are the two things we'll talk about today. So let's talk about the trade. You know what trade I'm talking about. So it's Travis Kelce was acquired by Waldrop here for 3 future firsts, 2023, 2024, 2025, plus Isaiah Pacheco. If we look at this starting lineup now, it's pretty intimidating. We've got Dak, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Mike Williams, Hollywood Brown, Kelce, Aaron Jones, and Allen Robinson as your flex plays. Those would be good starters for a lot of people. Allen, main wide receiver, main running back. Maybe not Robinson. Robinson's the weak link, I guess. In general, wide receivers are the weak link here, but overall, it's like an incredibly strong team. So was that a good trade? Was it a bad trade? Well, we'll find out in a year here if Waldrop wins the championship. If he wins, no one will care about what he gave away to win, and if he doesn't, then he's in for a long rebuild without much draft capital to fix it. Mostly because of the age, the general just age of his players. Dalvin Cook probably only has a year or two left of dominance. Prime. Aaron Jones, same deal. Nick Chubb has a lot of tread on the tires, but he's 26, so he probably only has a couple years left. Same thing with Kelce. I mean, everybody's gonna know that in a year or two, Waldrop's going to be selling some of these guys to try and get back in the draft capital game, but they're just not going to be worth much. They're depreciating assets. That's how you look at these guys. And he spent most of his startup draft capital and now his future draft capital to kind of go all in. Allen Robinson's 29. Mike Williams is 27. So he's on the younger side on this team. Then Hollywood's probably the youngest player at 25. He does have Aaron Rodgers, who's also old. There's just not a bunch like Adam Thielen, Galladay. There's just not a lot of guys. Julio Jones. There's not guys on this bench that are going to help out long term. They're going to be irrelevant in a couple years. So this is a very all-in strategy. It's pretty scary from a risk-taking standpoint. So the risk averse in me would be scared to, that side of me would be scared to make this deal, but I get the premise. And if he wins, then who cares, right? He's giving himself the best shot to win. So we'll see what happens. I personally wouldn't have done it. I feel like I would have used those, waited at least a little bit, see how the team does, see if there's any injuries to the team, and then later on maybe make that Godfather offer, because that one's still gonna get done later in the season. So we'll see how the early season plays out, and that's a big tip for you guys. Like, you don't have to make crazy moves early on. Just see how your team plays out. One piece is not gonna make or break the beginning of the year for your team. This team probably could have won a bunch of games without Kelce, starting like Tanyan or Gerald Everett or somebody. Still could have won a bunch of games and be in playoff contention without Kelsey, but that's my only criticism. Other than, I mean, it's a wild overpay, but maybe could have gotten Kelsey for less. I would think like 2 firsts would get it done for sure, but maybe not in our league. So who knows? Maybe we're different. So that's enough about that. So let's go into this concept of a team audit, and I've seen a few YouTubers do this where they basically look at someone's team and kind of lay it all out on paper and try to think of the strengths and weaknesses and kind of what the future plan is for this team. So I thought we'd start with my team. And one nice thing to do is just lay it all out here. Like what do you have at each position? So we'll start with quarterback. So for me, I have 5 quarterbacks on this roster, which is a lot. Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Jared Goff, Davis Mills, and Skylar Thompson. My running back room skews a little older with Eckler and Jacobs and Melvin Gordon, but we also have Khalil Herbert here, Burkhead, older, kind of plug, last minute plug if I have to, break glass in case of emergency kind of guy, and then Kelly as a backup for Eckler. Got Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin, DK Metcalf, Ayuk, Kadarius Toney, and then a bunch of names at wide receiver. And at tight end, we have Zach Ertz, Albert O, Trey McBride, Brevin Jordan. Those are all kind of interesting, couple of interesting younger players here with these 3, and then an older tight end as kind of like a stopgap. So the first thing that these guys usually do in these videos is talk about the core players, like who is long-term staying on this team. And actually, I'm struggling with this concept. So there's a lot of older players in big roles on this team, like Austin Eckler is older, Devontae Adams is older, and we've got Melvin Gordon as a backup here. Zach Ertz is an older tight end. These guys aren't going to play for too much longer, so they don't necessarily represent like core players, right? Core players are guys that are going to be on your team for a long time and kind of building blocks. Now, the obvious answers to this question are guys like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Jonathan Taylor, Javonte Williams, guys that you keep pretty much no matter what to build around. They're guys you build your team around. So I had a hard time answering this question for this team. Picking later in the draft, I don't think a lot of those guys were available at the 13th pick. So definitely ended up with a couple older picks for my first 2 picks. So what are we looking at? I think realistically, if I had to pick one guy to build around, it's DK Metcalf. This year might not be the best year with his quarterback situation, but I have a hard time ranking too many wide receivers above him just because of his talent level. And you would hope the situation improves after this year, like they draft Bryce Young or like CJ Stroud or somebody like that comes in and turns this offense into something very dynamic again. Who knows if Metcalf's going to be a wide receiver 1 this year or not? He definitely could be just on volume alone, but to me, he's an interesting piece that you could build your team around. Now, other answers that you could go with when looking at this team that I'm tempted to go with are guys like Trey Lance and Brandon Ayuk. Those are guys that I want to see what the chemistry is like. I want to see how good Trey Lance is, just period. But it's hard to say that these guys are core players yet, right? Who knows? Trey Lance might go out there and stink it up and be very bad. I'm guessing not. I'm guessing the running floor that we get from Trey Lance is going to make him an automatic like top 10 quarterback every week. But I might be totally wrong. It's it's a fascinating offense to have two parts of, and I was excited about with some later picks. But I wouldn't feel comfortable calling these core players that like I just could never trade, right? And then outside of that, I mean, Chris Godwin maybe because he's on the younger side. He's still 26 as a wide receiver. That's pretty young still for a wide receiver, not for a running back, but for a wide receiver that's pretty young. So you could see him sticking around on this team, but I don't think I would consider him like untradeable. These are guys that are worth more to you than just a few picks, a few chances at guys you could replace on your roster. And I think Metcalf's pretty much the only one that fits this bill. So right off the bat, that's a concerning piece to not have too many core players. You want guys you can build around to really make a strong dynasty team. So just something to think about there. So what draft capital do I have? Well, I didn't list it all out, but I haven't traded anything except for one third-round pick next year for Zach Ertz. Also traded Isaiah Likely there. He's blowing up. That might look like a dumb trade here. When the season starts, if Likely is really good, but I wanted to lock up that Arizona tight end group and have that for many years with Trey McBride already on my team. So who knows? Maybe I overpaid, maybe not, but I am down one pick, right? I'm not plus any picks. I'm down one pick for my third round pick. So now you have to ask yourself, is this team contending this year realistically? And we just looked at a really strong team, right? In Waldrop's team, I can also point to a few other teams that on paper look stronger than mine. This is a hard question to answer at the beginning of the year. Is this team contending this year? But the way I would like to frame that more is this team possibly going to make the playoffs? And I think the answer to that is yes. In a 14-team league, there's a lot of good starters here. I think Austin Eckler, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Godwin, those guys are going to start on most teams. Like Josh Jacobs, I'd slot him in over guys like Allen Robinson any day of the week. So he would definitely make it on even some of the most competitive teams. It all kind of depends on how Trey Lance is. If Trey Lance is very good, then this team is very competitive. Maybe down a little bit at the tight end spot to the upper echelon of tight ends, like your Pitts or, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, those kind of guys. But yeah, this team could be competitive. And so it could get into the playoffs. And that's really all you can ask for is getting your team to the playoffs. Anything can happen in the playoffs. Guys can get hurt. Some guy can pop off like crazy. But do you feel like your team can consistently, week in and week out, win games? And to answer that question a little bit better, we should look at the areas of need. And so I identified some areas of need for this team kind of down here. And I think the first thing that I think about with this team is the running back depth. I love Austin Eckler and Josh Jacobs, but outside of that, nothing too great to fill in those spots. I like Khalil Herbert a lot. I think Melvin Gordon is going to have his productive weeks, but this isn't a super deep running back room. It's not super young either. Like these three guys are older, and in a couple years, is Khalil Herbert, the only guy that you're excited about starting on a dynasty roster? So running back's going to have to be addressed either through the draft, which is a great place to address it, or through trades, which, we'd have to look at what does this team have in excess that we could afford to trade. So then the next piece is, QB is an area of concern. And this is just being realistic here. Is Trey Lance the guy or not? And the good thing is we have some options here Zach Wilson is another lotto ticket that I took. Jared Goff, whether you believe in him or not, maybe it's just me watching Hard Knocks and believing that he's amazing. Davis Mills, maybe he grows into something. One of these guys, I'm hoping, turns into a QB1. So we've taken a lot of shots, at least, at getting a good quarterback. We just haven't paid up that high price. The high price that was paid was Trey Lance, right? And that's the highest draft pick here on this roster in terms of our startup in particular. But it is an area of concern. You'd rather have an established guy like Aaron Rodgers or Dak Prescott or, someone like that, Tom Brady, leading the way if you were really trying to contend. So this is a developing area. And then tight end is the other piece. I feel good about the wide receivers. If that wasn't clear, that's like a strong suit for this team. Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin, DK Metcalf, Brandon Ayuk, Kadarius Toney, and some other guys that are not super interesting. I feel like that's a good start. And there's some younger players here. Godwin, Metcalf, Ayuk, and Toney could be on this team for a long time. So they're solid pieces. This wide receiver room looks pretty solid to me. Not a huge area of concern, but the tight end position, Zach Ertz is not a game changer. I'm hoping that he turns into a middling, tight end 6 kind of range guy. So we'll see how that turns out. The real question mark is if Trey McBride or Albert O or Brevin Jordan, one of these guys steps into the top 5 tight ends. You're hoping that with their athleticism and player profiles, they turn into that. So what I feel good about with this team is we in 2 areas of need, we've drafted a bunch of guys as kind of like lotto tickets, right? We've punched our lotto tickets, and hopefully some of them turn out to be something. And if not, we're going to have to acquire more established pieces or acquire more lotto tickets like draft picks or young guys that are interesting. But yeah, QB, there's no one super established that I'm going to feel comfortable starting every week if right this second. But the hope is Trey Lance will. Tight end, I actually have somebody who's startable every week in Zach Ertz, but that's not like championship level thought process. You're just getting a guy who could be a middling tight end, right? So then you ask yourself, like, what can this team afford to trade? And that question is pretty tough depending on the situation. If we feel like we're contending or not. So we're going to need some more data on that, which is just more weeks into the season. Give ourselves 5 or 6 weeks, see how everybody's doing. If it feels like this isn't a contender, then there are guys that are useful to other teams that you could sell. For example, the Austin Ecklers, Devontae Adams, Melvin Gordon. Those guys all make that list of useful. Even Zach Ertz is useful. These guys are useful for contenders. And we'll see. Could those guys be sold for future picks or future lotto tickets at running back or tight end or QB? So overall, what are we saying about this team? We're saying wide receiver is strong. Everything else is kind of questionable. So not great, but it's a 14-team league. And whenever we do all these, you're going to realize that a lot of people are going to have issues at almost every position. Maybe you have one sort of locked up that you feel good about, but this is a pretty standard process. So a lot of times guys like to, or YouTubers, they'll like to give some possible trade targets for this team. And we could do that. I kind of just did it, right? Like Austin Eckler for future draft capital, or Austin Eckler for future promising QBs or tight ends, things like that would make sense for this team. You can, if Zach Ertz isn't, if you aren't contending, then trading Zach Ertz for like a second round pick would be nice. Getting another shot at like a running back. Because think about it this way. A guy like Dameon Pierce, who is the hot commodity right now, he was drafted in the second round of this year's rookie draft for the most part. And he could turn into a running back one. He could. I mean, it's unlikely he's on a bad offense, but they could give him a lot of opportunity. Javonte Williams was the second round pick the year before. So anything can happen. People, second round picks are definitely very worthwhile and easy ways to acquire running backs. So hopefully this is helpful. Like kind of writing these things out and answering these questions should be good for you going forward to like really hone in your strategy. And if you want me to do more of these, just let me know. And yeah, good luck this season. Don't overreact to week one. Give yourself a little bit of time and enjoy some football.